This video discusses TopRank's report settings. It also discusses how to interpret the reports you obtain from a TopRank what-if analysis. The profit model you see here is used for illustration. The cells in the inputs section have all been identified as inputs. They contain risk-vary functions. The three cells in the outputs section have all been identified as TopRank outputs. Before running the what-if analysis, it is a good idea to click the Report Setting button on the TopRank ribbon. This brings up the dialog box you see here with three tabs. The defaults are currently checked, and chances are that these defaults will work fine for you. In the Reports tab, the tornado graphs and spider graphs will be discussed shortly. The Sensitivity Graphs option lets you see for each input how an output varies as that input varies. These sensitivity graphs essentially break the spider graph into many graphs, one for each input. The two detail options provide results in tabular form. Finally, the bottom option lets you show percentage changes in outputs in the tornado graphs instead of the default absolute changes. The Outputs for Report tab lets you choose the outputs you want reports for. For example, in the current model, you could choose to have reports only for the total profit output. Finally, the Inputs for Reports tab lets you specify how many inputs to list in the reports. In the default settings you see here, a maximum of 10 inputs will be listed in the reports, and an input will be listed only if the output changes by at least 1%, as this input varies over its range. One other setting for reports is in the Application Settings dialog box, found from the Utilities dropdown on the TopRank ribbon. By default, all report worksheets are placed in a new workbook. If you prefer them to be placed in the same workbook as your model, you can change the report placement option from New Workbook to Active Workbook. Assuming that you accept all of the default settings except to check Detail for All Inputs option, you will get a tornado sheet, a spider sheet, and a detail sheet for each output. You also get a summary sheet that basically summarizes the number of recalculations and the report settings. Here is the summary sheet. The tornado graph, shown here for the total profit output, is of primary interest. It shows a bar for each input, the length of which is the range in total profit from its minimum to its maximum, as the input varies over its range. The longer bars are placed at the top, hence the name tornado graph. You can see the total profit is affected most by variation in the unit sales price of Model 2. The data for the tornado graph are listed below it. For the same ranking of inputs, you see the two values of the input that produce the extremes in the output. For example, when the unit sales price for Model 2 is $9,000, the total profit decreases to minus $80,000, down about 136% from its base value. Similarly, when this input is $11,000, the total profit increases to $520,000, up about 136% from its base value. The spider graph shows the same basic information in a slightly different form. For each input, there is a line or possibly a curve that shows the change in the output as the input varies over its range. Therefore, inputs with the steepest lines are the ones that most affect the output. Again, the data for the spider graph are listed below the graph. You can see how the output changes for each step as each input varies over its 5 steps. Finally, the detail sheet lists the same data but in decreasing order of percentage change in the output. For example, the largest negative and positive change in total profit are when the unit sales price of Model 2 is at its two extreme values. Remember that all of these reports assume that inputs change one at a time, while the non-varying inputs are fixed at their base values. If you want to see the effects of two inputs varying simultaneously, you can use the risk-vary multi function to perform a multi-way analysis. This is discussed in a companion video in the guided tour series.